Hey there, and welcome back to On Your Terms. I'm your host, Sam Vander, Wielen, and today we have a very special guest. We have Erin Judge on the show to talk to you about a very real legal issue that she went through in her own coaching business. So Erin is an RD. She is a registered dietitian nutritionist who is a expert on gut issues and IBS issues. So you're going to hear a lot from her today, but she went through a contract issue with a client that is very real, very easy to navigate if you have the right pieces in place, and that I imagine will happen to you if it hasn't already. So I wanted to bring Erin on to talk through a real life scenario. And in us talking through it, actually a whole number of different contract issues came up or things that have happened in her business. So I think this is going to be really helpful and hands-on for you today. Make sure you stick through until the end of the episode, because at the end of today's episode, I'll share my 3 takeaways from everything that Erin shared, or the 3 main things. If you don't take anything else away, I want you to focus on these 3 things. So stick through with me all the way till to the end. And also, you want to keep your eyes peeled, because next week, October 16th, I'm announcing a big deal on the Ultimate Bundle that's only going to be around until that Friday. So for 5 days only, the 16th to the 20th. You're going to want to keep your eyes peeled for that. If you get my emails or if you listen here on the podcast, obviously you can always head to my website, samvanderwielen.com, but make sure you keep your eyes peeled for that. All right. With that, I would like to welcome Erin Judge to the show. Erin is a registered dietitian, nutritionist, a certified personal trainer, and the founder of Gutivate, a virtual nutrition counseling practice for digestive disorders and gastrointestinal conditions. Erin's expertise is in providing medical nutrition therapy for functional gut disorders with a patient-centered focus. She is proud of her work in education and advocacy for the IBS patient community through social media, as well as her work in providing resources for dietitians in the GI field. Let's welcome Erin to the show. Hey, Erin, welcome to On Your Terms.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that you're here. I would love if you would tell all the lovely people who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Erin Judge. I'm a dietitian, and I work in the IBS and digestive disorder space. So I've been running a virtual nutrition counseling practice for almost 5 years now, and we solely focus on IBS and digestive disorders and help people through one-to-one programs, online membership programs, pop-up programs, social media, everything that we can virtually.
Yes, and you do an epic job on social media providing so much value. If anybody listening has any IBS issues, or you know someone who does, I'm always sending people your way. My massage therapist, Ashley, she was telling me about IBS stuff, and I was like, you have to follow my friend Erin. And now I see her every Friday, and she's like, did you see what Erin said this week about this? She's so cute. So she
Funny.
Loves you.
Yeah, known as poop girl or IBS girl,
yeah.
and which is fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah, well, I love that you're taking a topic that, people I feel like you and I are similar in that respect of people don't want to talk about this kind of stuff. And they run away from us for different reasons. People don't want to talk about poop, and people don't want to talk to their lawyer, And I feel like we do a good job of being hey, come hang out with us. We can make this fun. You have a poop pillow?
I
need
do,
a lawyer pillow.
So poop pillow, a colon pillow. I've got a poop outfit, poop socks, all the things. Just
anything you got to do.
Yeah, it's having fun, and life doesn't last that long, and so we have to have fun with something. And I like that my work is sort of taboo in some ways and stigmatized, but getting to have fun with it and break down some barriers has been a really cool thing to get to do.
Absolutely. Yes. And unfortunately, you and I have both been very personally affected and impacted by grief. And I do feel like that makes you, I don't know, have a little more fun with some of these things where we can, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for full disclosure, Erin and I are friends. And so I'll admit that up front. This is all a sham. We're actually friends, but she is also an Ultimate Bundle member. Actually, you were in the bundle before I knew you.
Yes, I was in the bundle before. I think I was in the bundle maybe before I even followed you on Instagram. So I think I was in the bundle before I knew even who you were, which is interesting. It was almost like a very disconnected. So I think even whenever we officially met in person, there were just the moments of us becoming friends. And I was like, wait a second, this is you're this person. I didn't realize that I even bought this, forever ago, and this is what I've been using, and that's you. I somehow never put the pieces together when we actually became friends.
Yeah, I know. Well, when people are like tackling the legal part of their business, I think they're just like, let me just get this over with, you know? So that makes sense to me. But we've since become friends and we went to Mexico in March. That was amazing. Can't wait to go back there. But I remember a couple of weeks ago you called me and you were telling me this is a perk of being friends. And you were telling me that you had a little bit of a sticky contract issue going on. So could you fill everybody in as to like what was going on and then you and I can talk through it?
Yeah, definitely. And yes, the best thing about having friends, one in business as a whole, getting to talk through hard things and fears, but also someone who understands legal stuff. Because I will say, as a health practitioner in business, the legal side of things feels so incredibly scary and overwhelming. And especially when you just want to help people, like sometimes I feel like the legal part, like it feels very daunting. And there's a lot of fears around that. So it's always helpful to communicate those. But this particular situation, I'll give some back to context because I think whenever I mentioned this to you, there was this history of where the fear was coming from. So I remember one of my first clients that I took on, one of the first people I ever allowed to have a really long-term payment plan. So our services, we work in packages. So we create payment plans for clients in order to spread that payment out. And they start paying before they meet with us. But once the payment plan starts, it kind of keeps going. And then we're meeting with them, we're providing the service, we're providing, everything that we have agreed to. And then there's just mutual trust a little bit that we're providing our service and that they're also continuing to pay their payment plan. So this one client, we gave her a 12-month payment plan for a 4-month program. Bad idea. And it was very
Red
low.
flag alert.
Yeah, red alert. But I felt bad. I wanted to offer something people could afford. Like I was trying to
Mhm.
do it out of compassion. And, she kind of convinced, it was one of those things where I was like, I think I trust her. And ultimately she had a baby and decided that after she had her baby, even though we had finished our program together with success, she couldn't pay her payment plan anymore. And she just ditched me. And it was so low. I think she probably owed me like $300 or $400. My pricing overall was pretty low at that time. But I remember feeling just like almost robbed. Like I felt like someone came into my house and like robbed me. And I remember getting so upset about it. And years later, she apologized, which I really appreciated. But I felt just so betrayed and frustrated. And that was the first time this had ever happened to me in business. So immediately 12-month package was all taken away. I was like, we'll never do that again. Started charging more for payment plans because I didn't do that before, all those things. Because I was like, I can't take on that risk again. So fast forward to a few months ago, we had a client who was signed up to work with us. So we, again, 4 months. Our contract is very solid in terms of this is 4 months. You are responsible, for scheduling your appointments. We communicate that as clearly as we can. I always try to vet out, and communicate what's involved. Like it is going to be 4 months. We're committed to you. You're committed to us. Like we are a team for 4 total months. And we had someone who, summer was busy and wanted to pause her program. And we've
Mm.
dealt with pauses in the past. And it's okay, that there are situations and we can work with. But we like there to be boundaries. And so we try to establish those boundaries. And in the meantime of us trying to figure out, okay, when do we restart? Like what's the clear cut, communication about what this pause looks like? Her next payment and her payment plan was charged automatically. We charge automatically now. We keep credit card, we do all the right things now that we didn't do before. And, she reached out. And this was the day I messaged you because she reached out and said, well, I thought we were pausing, but I just got charged. And our contract is very clear in that like the payment plan keeps going. I know, we can talk about some other things we were discussing, but I had to communicate with so much fear because my biggest fear was like, okay, she's just going to ditch us. And like, this is a client that was working with a member of my team as well. I'm already paying the team member. She's been doing the work. She's been reaching out. This person hasn't been responsive even. So we're putting in lots of work that is now kind of getting voided, all this communication. So it was a little bit messy. And my biggest fear was like, she's going to just cancel her card, maybe do a chargeback. We've never had that. It was a
Mm.
large amount of money. The fees on it alone are just so much. And I was so afraid to say, you know, we need to accommodate your pause, through a very clear cut, date. Like we need a date now to say we can even allow a pause, and we need to know what that looks like. We also do not allow payment plans to pause. Like the payment plan will continue as per the contract. So I messaged you. I was like, oh no, what do I do if she like cancels on us or like charges us back? Because at that time, before we open up the communication channel a little bit more, it just felt really scary, and that was my biggest fear at that moment. It didn't happen. So I'll say it worked out, and the client was very considerate and understanding. So it was more me, but it still felt scary.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think it's helpful in a way now that it's worked out, that I feel like it's always helpful to look back at those situations. Like these things are always opportunities for us to clean up our own like legal stuff, back end systems, like procedures even of like what we do. And like I think one of the things that I remember talking to you about was that like we can't anticipate every variable of every situation. We would have to have like 8,000 contracts. Our contracts would be 8,000 pages, and so some of this is like just first, just releasing yourself, I feel like, as a business owner to be like, I don't need to necessarily have a plan for every single thing. And then if we have the basics, then we can like navigate it moving forward. And some of these things are just learning lessons, right? And you and I talked about that. Like you obviously learned from the first person who who did this. You learned a lot and like you adjusted, right? So I just want everyone listening too to realize like I feel like there's like a lot of shame sometimes, like you were saying, there can be this like, oh no, are they going to leave me? And then sometimes that can cause people to question themselves, their service, their quality of service, like that kind of stuff. So I think just embracing that that's like normal and that we're always updating. On our team, we always call it the like, oh, didn't know we had to cover that kind of thing, because we're always like, wow, like so, people shock me, right? I think of every scenario, and then somebody pulls a fast one on us. I'm like, wow, I did not think about saying that in my contract. So now we have that language. So like these things are movable, breathable documents. So that's cool, right? But I think it's a really good like point that you bring up about like the pause in your business, like from your, I don't know, like business policy was probably more to allow somebody to take time, right? Like because they were too busy. Like in the example you gave, this woman was busy, right? Or the other person had a baby. But you financially, like what you and I were talking about, was like you financially were on the hook. So like you had made space, you had paid the person, like you had all of the things, and this person had gotten access to a lot of resources that technically speaking they could have bounced with, right? So that's like Erin or other people like Erin who have these rules in place. Like they're not trying to be evil. This is part of the deal. And if you go to Target and you get a blanket and you pay for it, you can't be like, well, my summer got busy and now I'm tired and I also had a baby, so like I'll think about paying you later in the fall. Like it's just not how it works, right? So I wanted to clear that up for you too, that this is not you being evil, but it's okay for you to have business boundaries, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad that you said that. And I think that that's so true most of the business owners I know are that way, where we get into business to help people, right? Like we get in, especially in healthcare, it's like we get into business to do good. And if I always say, if money wasn't a thing and I could do all the work that I do for free for people, I 100% would, because it is so fulfilling and I understand. But I also know how hard it is when you are coming into a business relationship as a client. Like sometimes you don't see what all goes on behind the scenes, and it's easy just to
Yeah.
think like, oh, this doesn't matter, or like, whatever it may be, that goes through your mind. And obviously if you're not getting a service that you were supposed to be getting, that's a different conversation. But whenever you are and you're just not responding to people, or you're not understanding that there's an assistant that's taking time that costs money, there are credit card fees that are a lot of money, that if someone's not charging you those fees, like we eat it as business owners, and we pay, a lot of money to work with people. And sometimes there's licensure fees that we pay on our end. And there's so many things that go into it. And,
Mhm.
I never want to be the person to say, guilt trip somebody of like, oh, you should feel guilty because you are trying to cancel on me and like I'm, losing money. But I think if people could really see how much money could be lost and is lost often from these situations before they're protected. There's a lot of
Yeah.
situations like that in our business where now we're protecting them. And I know you and I talked about that of like, how do we protect this? If like my flexibility of allowing pauses and allowing, space to maybe spread things out and just like being really reasonable with somebody, like that can come back and hurt me for wanting to be reasonable. And so now it's like, okay, well, now I have to put that language in a contract, which you read it and
Yeah.
you might think that sounds so silly as a client, but at the same time, it's like, well, you don't know like what people have been capable of, and you may not even know what you do to someone, to a business owner, like because it's just hard to see it until you've walked those shoes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the things I like about having legal protection in place is that to me, it like depersonalizes it a little bit and makes it a little bit more businessy, right?
Yeah,
Like it's not you, Erin, that's making this choice. It's like you have a company, this is the policy, you agreed to it, and that's that. But
yeah,
yeah, I mean, so much of what you're talking about is about like accommodation. And I think that accommodating people can be really nice. And I think what's so unfortunate about like I feel like what I've learned, what you've learned in business is that unfortunately sometimes when you accommodate people, it can go sideways, right? And like there are lots of people we've accommodated and everything's been fine. That's great. But then there are people you accommodate who it doesn't go the same way. So to Erin's point, like what we talked about was writing something into your contracts that says we don't allow like a pause typically speaking. However, it's at our discretion, for example, that like the member or the customer will be like granted a one-time 30-day pause or maximum 60-day pause. Like you can even put a limit on how long. Like for everybody listening who's a coach, this is absolutely something you would have to address because people ask to pause all the time.
mhm,
This is very common. So you would like put a limit and you would say that it's also a one-time thing. Just like Erin said, you would also say like your payments will continue, or like if they paid you up front, like you're not returning any money or something like that. So you would say that that haul has to continue. But I know that one of the things that we talked about was saying about how you would also put an end date, like by regardless of like the extension or whatever, all the customer's entire program must be completed by, and then you would like put the date, like let's say if it was a 4-month program, it would be like 5 months or 6 months out, or so, however long of an extension you're willing to give. But I think having that language up front could help you to in the future now to navigate this kind of issue.
absolutely. And we definitely started working on that right after.
Yeah.
And I think, this particular client definitely understood and appreciated
Mhm.
the pause. Will she restart with that? That's always the to be continued. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the fact that she is paid, I do think helps because she's more motivated, and like it's a win-win for both sides where my dietitian is being paid properly, and like we have our side of that contract and that spot she took, but also now she has this covered, and like there is motivation to like get what she came for in the program, because at the end of the day she signed up for a reason, and like we truly do believe that we know we provide good service. So ultimately it does work out. And all of our clients who've gotten pauses for reasonable reasons, it always works out really well and people do really appreciate it. It's just making sure you're protected in that, so that we're not constantly accommodating to the point where, and I've done this in the past, you're making no money and you're working, countless
Mhm.
hours and you can't take on new clients, and you're stuck in a place that's hard to get out of because you just want to help. But we
Mhm.
can't help if we're all just bleeding money. The business can't survive that's helping the people. So yeah, it's a lot of lessons that I've had to learn along the way.
Yeah, yeah, you're definitely not alone in that. And like yeah, I guess it is like unfortunate that, one person can kind of spoil it for others, and like I think all of us have been burned at some point or another, and so that's why we've had to put rules in place. But like if you hadn't had that contract in place with the language that it had, you wouldn't have been able to enforce it because she would have just stopped paying. And to be honest too, if she would have done a chargeback threat because you provide a service and not a physical product or a good of some sort, if she had done a chargeback threat without a contract in place, she would have won because no service was being provided.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you about chargeback threats because we had talked about this earlier. And so chargeback threat, for anybody who doesn't know, is like when you charge somebody's credit card for something and then that person goes to their credit card company and complains about the charge on their card to try to get that charge off of their card. And I think sometimes people think that like the credit card companies are like really nice and that they just like eat the fees, but no, that actually comes back to us. So they take the money back from us as the business owners, the merchant. So if in order to properly like fight a chargeback threat, you actually have to have chargeback language in your contract, which was in your contract. So I remember that was something that you and I talked about was like, if she does a chargeback threat, you have language right there that says that you don't accept chargeback threats and that that wouldn't be tolerated.
Yeah, yeah, which is always a fear. I'm like always afraid to charge. I've never had a chargeback ever. I think with chargebacks, the biggest fear is like that feeling of like the almost like you whenever you're in high school and someone goes to the crowd of friends and tells a lie and like starts a rumor about you. I feel like chargebacks feel like that way as a business owner, where it's like I did provide you the service, I did give you this, like I did offer what I was supposed to, and like I don't know what happened, but like that type of
Yeah.
fear is always so strong. And yeah, we do have that in our language. We haven't had to use it. Thankfully, no one has done that, which has been really great. It is still always a fear though. So it's like nice. I think that's what I asked you. It's like, what happens if they do a chargeback? What do I do? And I know all of our use Stripe, and they have places to easily work on that dispute. We keep really good documentation of like our
Mhm.
check-ins. We do things through email, so we have threads of that available. We don't typically handle things on the phone, so that always helps. But yeah, it is a big fear.
Yeah, I don't blame you because like you said, it's like you've done all the work and then the idea that somebody could just come and take back the money is really scary. Like you need to be able as a business owner, you have to be able to rely on the money you've generated for your business and like you're making decisions based on that. Um, what we talked about was that when somebody like Stripe or PayPal comes to you and they'll let you know, so you'll get an email, usually they'll say like, "Oh, there's a chargeback threat that's been made by this person." They have to make like a claim, like a reason, like there's usually like codes or something and it's like product not as described or like service not provided because they actually have to have a reason. And so what sucks about this is like the handful of times that this has happened to me. I mean, we've processed thousands and thousands of payments and like this only happened a handful of times. People will always say that like the product wasn't as described or that they didn't like it or something like this. And we just submit like the contract that they agree to when they sign up and we have a 100% success rate with the chargeback threats. I know that all the other people in the ultimate bundle who have talked about this, it's just like you have to have the right paperwork. So the contract would be the one thing that you would have turned into them. Like you said, any emails, any communication. Even if you do deal with anybody on the phone, write them an email after you talk to them on the phone and say, "This is just a follow up from our earlier conversation in which you asked me for a 1 month extension of your contract, which we agreed to, but you also understood that your payments will continue on time." Like you literally, it's called memorializing. So we literally just memorialize our conversations. Even if you have like a DM or they like write in your Facebook group, like that's probably something that I would do is like have somebody in your team follow up and you write something more formal. And then that's all the kind of stuff that you would submit. And you will have a 100% success rate with fighting any sort of chargeback threats. They're annoying, but they can be so easily handled if you have the right stuff in place.
Yeah, that's always good to know. Like it takes away some of those fears to just focus on the actual people, like focus on the
Yeah.
actual work, instead of feeling like you're always on edge or wanting to be reactive. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that something you were talking about earlier would be really helpful to hear your thoughts on that. Like you were talking about how you're a very heart-centered person. I know you. You're a very kind and loving and giving person, right? And you are doing the work that you are doing because you want to help other people. How do you balance that with having boundaries as a business owner at the same time and like having to have maybe like toughen up a little bit in that
Yeah.
respect, right? And like we can't be nice all the time.
Yeah. Oh, that's been so hard. I think in some ways I've done it well. In some ways I haven't done it well at all. I'm, right around 5 years in, and I would say it's been a journey. So at first it was very much accommodate everybody, people pleaser. If someone's not happy, I'll give them even more, very low charges, like overdoing it like most people do at the start. Then I think I got into a little bit of resentment where it's like, whatever, I don't need you as a client. I'll cut you out if you're mean. I got through that phase of my life, which wasn't much, but it was there. I think the biggest game changer for me was actually hiring help and
Mm.
empowering the team that I hired to really help me do that well. So what I mean by that is like, yeah, getting my contracts in place helped with like, people agreeing to money and payment plans and, all that stuff is so important and helps at least take it out of like me having to talk about it all the time. And it's just like, okay, this is how the process goes. But I have my assistant, my virtual assistant, who helps with like some of our communication, and she does the payment plans. She does our client onboarding now, and she handles like a payment was declined. How do we handle that? And she also sends like rescheduling reminders. So she's the one really keeping up with like, okay, what's this timeline? What is the payment plan? What's going on? And we've talked in length about my weaknesses where I will just keep extending people and just keep giving them more and more of my time beyond what I should, according to the agreement. And so she's very good about one, handling some of those conversations for me so it doesn't mess up my relationship with my client as much as she can until I need to step in as like the owner. And that always works out super well. But then she also is really great at telling me like, hey, do you realize this person's been on, they're coming up on their 4 months, like, are they doing a continuation month with you? Do we need to set up that package and like that payment? What else do we need to do here? And she has really helped empower me to like say, okay, you're right, we do need to do that. So like accountability, um, more than anything. And then we do offer like continuation packages because we used to extend people. And I realized like, okay, they paid for that amount of time. Like I can't keep giving my services without being paid. And so we started offering these different packages. And when I've had successes with clients who've been on top of it, that's super encouraging to me. So I've built a lot of my own confidence of like, oh yeah. And I don't work with like I always say, I don't work with the richest people in the world. I work with people who, are sacrificing to work with me, which is so hard. It's not just like a drop in the bucket for them. It is a really big deal, but I've had clients who are so willing to pay me when I should be paid in order to like get that service. And that is a reminder of like, oh yeah, this is valuable. Like this is important. Like this is expected from this person. It's not just me in my head thinking like they can't do it or they won't do it or whatever it may be, or that I need to just give them all of me for whatever that small price was at the beginning. So yeah, accountability plus more confidence, the more that people have actually done it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think confidence goes a long way. Like, I think the more you practice this, but I could also see how not, I feel like you have to make a lot of decisions as a business owner day to day. Like, and so you have decision fatigue, like on a good day.
Mhm.
So, not having to constantly be like, oh, this person's going to be mad at me. Like, should I do this? Or what if this person leaves? What if they just end up canceling their card? Like, you just get out of having to make all those decisions by delegating that to somebody who's not so like wrapped up in it, right? And they're
Yeah.
not dealing with these people day to day.
Yeah, she's more, and she's comes in to onboard them at the start. So she's kind of known as
Mhm.
being like the assistant. So it's helpful because she's already from the starting point that she's the one that you go to for like technology issues or like those little things that as the provider, it can make you get in your head of like, oh, they're not happy, they're upset, whatever. When they're not, it's just they couldn't log into their account, it's like such a small thing that they need help with, but having that a bit separated has been helpful. And then I'm that person for my team often where like this instance that we talked about, the client messaged both the dietitian she's working with and myself. I'm the one that handled it and put the
Mm.
language in place and then put them together to like decide, starting date, based on the dietitian's comfort too. But, having that person who can kind of handle that, like, hey, your card was declined. Like, do you have another card you want to use? Like, simply just making that statement, is so much easier with someone who's not the provider. And we've
Yeah.
had zero issues really with that. Every time I thought, now we also charge, we have a fee if you try to cancel your contract before you begin with us, because that's a problem we've
Mm.
seen in the past. I know you and I talked about that where I didn't have it before and I had someone and then their card was declined whenever I went to charge it. And it's like, oh no, they gave me a false card. I spiraled again. This is all the same week. So I was like, bad week already. It's like, oh no, they're just going to like not even message me back. And I can't even enforce this thing I have in my contract. And they were so reasonable and they fixed the
Mm.
problem and it worked out and it was fine. And she helped me handle that to help like, okay, she put the credit card in there. She's working to charge it. She's following up with people and it takes that weight off of me to feel like I have to do that and also have that emotional connection with this person based on their healthcare needs.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to continue to serve somebody when you're like a little pissed about their contract stuff or payment or whatever. It's a little too close to home.
Yeah.
So I like that idea. At what point in your business did you end up hiring a VA? Like, how were you able to go from it being you, not like to not handling that yourself?
Yeah. I've hired some assistants before this person, but she was the first one who started doing that. And I think she came on uh, 2 to 3 years into my business. She was actually one of my first clients,
Oh, that's cool.
that alone like was the trust was built. She knew my company. I knew she had a virtual assistant business because of our work together. So I reached out to her to see if she had extra room or just what that would look like. And because she had already worked on the back end, she had a background in health, like insurance billing before. I don't remember how long it took for her to really do that part of it, maybe two years ago. So I guess the first like 3 years of my business. Um, but yeah, and it's always been sort of automated, but the handling of okay, this didn't go through, or all that stuff, it was something I was doing before that. So it's
Yeah.
definitely been a game changer having that, and even the onboarding part, like outside of money. Technology is huge. Of just like, can someone log in? Are they frustrated with that process? Because technology can be really frustrating, and how to log their food in the platform that we use and how to access things. Like having to deal with like those frustrations as someone that's also now coming in as the provider, like I feel like sometimes it did put a little bit of a it was just a sour taste, or it felt like me as the provider, I felt like I was always on edge, like, oh no, here we go again, like, that was wrong, and then maybe I miscommunicated something. It made me feel like the load was like getting heavier for me, even if the client never felt that way, but it just at least allowed the client to have someone to go to for those separate issues, and took some of that weight off of me so that I could work on, okay, the actual relationship, and the struggles I get to handle are the ones of, the healthcare process or things like that, which do come up in my work too. So, yeah, it's been such a game changer.
Yeah, it lets you stay in your zone of genius, and
Mhm.
that's what I'm making notes on. And then, like, I'm also seeing that, like, separating you from like that more stressful stuff in the business. Like, I know for me, it was a game changer for me when I let go of that part of the business and brought somebody on to handle it, because that was the stuff that was making me like resent the business or work or creating content or creating for my like for my email list or whatever. And, like, now I don't see if somebody writes me a really bad email, like, they take care of it, I don't see
Mhm.
it. I see all the other emails and I reply to that stuff, but I don't see, like, the really bad stuff, or if somebody doesn't pay, I don't know. So I can continue to just show up and serve, because I don't know about you, Erin, but, like, for me, I also felt like I had, like, thousands of people in the Ultimate Bundle, right? And I do have thousands of people in it, and if, like, one person would say write something mean or not pay or cancel their card, I would make up this whole big story about how, like, this applied to everyone,
Mhm.
and then I would be like, "This isn't fair to everybody else, like, all these people do is want from me, and they take, and they don't mind not paying, and blah, blah," and I was like, "Wait, we're talking about one person out
Yeah.
of thousands of people," right? And so, just like in your DMs, you get you get some interesting ones. And then but you have way more people who are there being respectful and are interested in thanking you and all of that kind of stuff, right? It's like hard to balance that, not applying it to
Oh,
everyone.
absolutely. And I don't think that changes, right? No matter how personal your business is or not. Mine's extremely personal because it is
Mhm.
based on my knowledge and my experience, and even my
Yeah.
own history with IBS and my personal connection to everything there. And you're right. Sometimes people are frustrated, and we don't get a lot of negative reviews from clients like that. Did happen a little bit more with a team, and,
Mm.
transitioning people to different levels of care, especially in the past. But, whenever that has happened, even if I can tell myself, like, they're frustrated because they didn't do the work, or like they're frustrated because this curveball came in their life, that threw them off from what the work that we're doing. Like, it's still so easy to take it personally of like, well, I must be a terrible provider because, they had a family death, and then they had, school changes, and then their kids got sick for months on end. So it must be my fault, that I couldn't help them like do perfectly through that situation. It's so easy to take that on. And even if a client doesn't even blame me for it, there are often times where I would
Mhm.
blame myself that it is my fault, or, all of that. And especially a bad review, which doesn't happen often. It happened once from a mother named Karen of a child who
That's hilarious.
accidentally signed up for something that said 2 payments and she thought she only needed to make 1 payment, that whole situation. So it's one
Yeah.
of my Yelp reviews, but it's funny because it's clearly, it's clearly fake and just charged.
Yeah.
But even when I remember whenever that happened, that was my first year of business, I think, or second. And just being told that you're like a fraud and lying to everyone, even though I literally have a screenshot of like, this is the page that she signed. It literally says 2 payments. Here's
Yeah.
the agreement. It does get to you and it hurts a bit. And, the legal side, I think, helps add that layer of protection so that it doesn't truly hurt you completely. But the emotional,
Yeah.
mental side of it is still very hard. I wish we had a contract for that.
Yeah, I know, right? That would be nice. I know. It's
Enforced
the
contract.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're right. It's the personal side. I
Yeah,
think I think it's like we take it personally, and that makes a lot of sense to me as to why. Like I think when it's your business, like you've just put everything into it, and
yeah,
and then your face is plastered all over it, and you and your poop pillow. So it's like hard to, it's hard not to take it personally when something goes wrong. And so that makes sense. The only two things that have helped me in this arena, like you and I have talked about this, but like continuing to practice that separation of me and my business, just period. That's like across the board. That's really helpful. Just like my business is my business. I'm a separate person and like whatever. I just kind of like run my business. So that helps. And then I think the second thing that's helped me when we had only like one like interesting person who wrote a bad review in this like 7 years, who was like 9 months after she bought the ultimate bundle, suddenly realized that she didn't want it. And she had logged in like a bunch of times and then just like threw a fit. And so she went on one of these like public social media tirades where she like posted about us and tagged us and tried to like smear me online. It's whatever. But it was helpful to like have that attitude of like, let her have her tantrum, right? Like sometimes your clients are going to just have tantrums and it actually has nothing to do with us. Like you were
mhm,
saying, like they could be going through all this other stuff. And so let them have their tantrum. And I don't need to control other people's narrative of me.
mhm,
Like that's been like a huge one for me to just come back and be like, it's okay for them to think that about me. And if it's okay, it's okay for them to think something that I don't see as being true or consistent with my character or whatever. Like it's all right. And just like practicing releasing that control. It's way easier said than done, but that's like really the only thing that's helped.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. And what helps me is sometimes remembering just having to give myself that conversation of like, this is not worth my time. Like my clients that are
Mm,
showing up truly my clients. I don't have clients that are acting like that. It's like that's not worth my time. I can handle it. If I lose money over it, I can move on. I've gone through it before. It all will get better, but it only gets better if I focus on what's really important. And I've had those periods where I've let it get to me with bitterness. And it
yeah.
shows up where then that becomes true a little bit, where you're not the best practitioner or provider, or the content you put out kind of sucks because you were bitter and guarded and you know you were frustrated and of yourself. And I've done the whole go to Instagram stories of like, can you believe someone commented this about me,
Yeah.
and even that sometimes I usually delete it right after, so I'm like, wait, that doesn't feel good, nor is it really helpful. It's like it's more helpful just to delete it, block them, move on. They're not worth it. They're not worth that energy. Like what's worth it is like, okay, how can I show up and educate? How can I give to the people that actually care? Because that's where one, I'll make money, as a business owner, but also it's where I'll end up feeling better and like I'm truly valued. I'm not valued by the person that, thinks I'm stupid online or whatever it might be. I
Yeah.
don't
You
get
don't
that
need that
often.
person.
Yeah, that's also my assistant. She does a lot of that. She does filtering because she follows me and will like comment or interact. She lets me know if people are reaching out to my audience. That happens all the
Mm,
time. Practitioners,
yes.
using my comment section to leave the same comment every day, to try to boost their own profile. Like, all those little things that are just so annoying and can lead you to compare yourself. Like, she handles that and we have a process for it. And it very much is you're blocked or restricted. No one's going to see your stuff. I'm not giving you any of my attention. And we're moving on because it's just not worth it.
Yeah, definitely. I call that Instagram sharking. It's really
So,
annoying. Yeah,
yeah.
there's like waiting in the waters to see like, can I jump into Aaron's clients?
I had to ask
Oh,
somebody once. I was like, does does everyone else see this? Like, do you recognize this? Or is it just me that like this same person leaves like a clappy hand every day or, always has to bring it back to like, this is what I help my clients
This
do,
is what I always do.
things like that. It's not even bad. Like a lot of times they're agreeing, but more often than not, it's not them. It's someone that's
Yeah.
trying to help them grow. And it feels kind of dirty as the
Oh, absolutely.
person. Um,
If it makes you feel any better, I was just writing this in my book yesterday. When I first, it was after I started my business, but I would say it was like when it first started to take off. A girl from my law school wrote to me and was like, "Oh, I'm so inspired by you. I'm so impressed that you like left the law, blah, blah, blah. I want to leave law too, but like, don't worry, I'm doing something totally different. I want to become a health coach." I'm like, okay. So she joins my Facebook community and proceeds to, I had thousands of people in there at the time. It was like this free Facebook community. She proceeded to Facebook message every single person in the community to sell them fat loss pills and told them that her and I were friends from law school. So everybody thought that it was like I was helping her to do this. Not good. And let's
mhm.
just say she did not get the best part of my personality when I found out about this. I was like, "What are you doing?" Like, that is not okay. Yeah, it's
Oh,
not cool. So, it does happen to
I
people.
know it happens. So, I mean, it's taught by coaches. And I remember
That's
the business
wild.
coach that helped me start on Instagram. There were some things that were just not really great. I probably don't have on you. But there
Yeah.
were some things that weren't great, but it did help me start my business. But one of the methods was like, oh, you go find, people who are doing the same thing and you like basically mimic their posts and you do all this. And it was, thankfully, I mean, I'm very hardcore. I have to be authentic, like emo band where, that's me. And so
Yeah.
my being cannot fully copy someone and feel good about it. But I remember I tried that a few times where I was like, okay, I'm going to comment on all these people's posts. I was like, I don't have anything to say. And I feel
Yeah, this is so weird.
like I don't feel like myself. Like I feel like I'm trying to do something that I can't do. Like I'm trying to be funny in ways that I'm just not. I don't understand what I'm even saying. Like, and it was a waste of my time. It's so draining. And so thankfully early, I was like, I'm not doing that. And then I held the badge of like, pride of like, well, I've never done that. So you shouldn't have to do that. And now it's like, okay, I have grace for people. Like I get it. They're hustling. They're trying to do what they're trying to do. But
Mhm.
I've asked, I mean, my assistant is a great example. She'll tell me all the time. She's like, that's just so strange. I don't understand. Like anyone who messaged, like, I don't get it. Like, what are they? I don't trust them because they're like trying to use you. And like, it's
Mhm.
just weird. And it's like, yeah, it really is. Like, it feels very insecure. And then as me being on that side of it, because I've gotten to see that, it's like I have a very strong, like, I don't want to use my friends. I didn't ask to be on your podcast. You asked me, it's like,
I
I don't
did.
want to use my friends for their following or use people for what they have to offer in their communities, like because at the end of the day I think it does show. And I don't, and everything becomes public. I think we see that on
Mhm.
TikTok now, like everyone knows all your business and things will come back to haunt you if you're trying to like
What's happening over on TikTok? Fill us in for
TikTok is
those of
like
us who aren't there.
ruthless, right? It's like you
Oh,
try to sneak around and like they will dig you up. Like it's like a ton of
that's
reporters,
hilarious.
where everyone can like look at what you posted 10 years ago and follow you along, which that in of itself, maybe don't go too wild on people because like everyone has had a past. But at the same time, it's like I think it shows and people will see it. It's not like you
Mhm.
can hide yourself trying to, message people, steal things from people. And you talk about that a lot, like the copycats. I don't think I've ever had
Mhm.
that. I used to panic about it and try to like search all my keywords. And now I'm like, okay, no, I can't care about that because it's going to waste my energy. So I haven't had that yet, but things like even just mimicking posts, I used to get so mad at people like, why are you copying me? And now it's like, you know what? Let them do what they're gonna do. Like people
Mhm.
see it, and honestly, I don't care at the end of the day because if they didn't have the creativity to come up with it, like they're not gonna have the creativity to sustain it, and that's fine.
Yeah,
Or the
absolutely. That's such a
TikTokers
good
will
point.
find them.
Yeah, apparently. I
I
like
know.
this little investigative side of TikTok.
Yeah.
It's intriguing. Maybe I should be on TikTok.
It's
That's funny.
drama, it's like everyone finding out anything, it's like all the hot topics, like people there's a lot of cancel culture to it, which I think can be a little
Yeah, I
intense
hate.
and like ganging up
Yeah.
on people. But at the same time, it's like you can't be fake because the more maybe you get in the spotlight, the more people, one, don't want that. And so people will be there to try to bring you down, which is really rough. But if you get there in a way that's not truly authentic, like there's no way you can stay there. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think this has been such an interesting conversation. I hope so helpful for people about like navigating some of these sticky issues. Are there any other legal questions or anything you have for me before we go today?
Oh, do I have any other legal questions? I don't think so. Probably because I haven't thought enough about them. I have a situation if we have time, because it might
Yeah,
take
go
some
for it.
time,
You
because I didn't know how to
have a
deal with
situationship?
this. So hiring,
Mm.
and we'll talk employees because I know contractors, we're in the contract model now. It was smarter, should have done that to start. I did employees at first, and I had an employee once, full time, that was not working 40 hours when that was agreed to. And I knew it the whole time, didn't enforce, like, kept trying to follow up on it, didn't know how to handle it. Well, then when she left, which was fairly abrupt, I lost so much money having to
Mm.
refund people above even what I needed to because she wasn't fulfilling their contracts. Um,
So like people were trying to book with her, but she
she
wouldn't
wasn't showing up
schedule?
on time. She wasn't
Wow.
responding to emails on time. Like all of that's in our contract of what we are responsible for. And so she just wasn't working. And I'm still a little like hurt by it because that again
Yeah.
felt like a slit throat of like, oh my gosh, you stole from me, you betrayed me. And I let it go because at the end of the day, it's like I'm not going to take any legal action against this person, nor do I have true proof, I guess, that that happened. But how do you handle that? Or like, what do you do to set
Mhm.
yourself up, especially in employees versus like contractor situations where there's a salary and
Yeah.
time that they're committed to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, okay, so on the I'll answer it kind of a little bit of both, so that if people, I know a lot of people are hiring contractors, like you said. So, if you were hiring contractors, the way that you would handle this is that in the contract, which I saw the template for, but in the contract, you would have it spelled out about like how they get paid and when they get paid, and they would only get payment once they fulfill. So, whenever you're dealing with contractors, that we would prevent this situation from happening in the future by making sure like she wouldn't have gotten paid until she actually fulfilled those hours, had those sessions, the client money was already in the bank, like that kind of thing. With employees, employees are so much trickier in terms of like documentation and having to really like be so much more formal than even I probably appreciated before I started hiring full-time employees. Because again, to back to the beginning of our conversation, I think we all come at this like thinking everyone's good and means well and we like people and we're just trying to help and yada yada. And unfortunately, not everyone is like that. So with employees, first you would have an employment contract, right? Where it would spell out like what the hours are, what the expectations are, and what has to be fulfilled. From there, like you were saying that you had hints all along that you felt like this was not what was happening, like she wasn't doing stuff. So if and when you had those hints and you looked into it and you had something to actually like show, first you would have had like a meeting with her to discuss it. And then you would have followed up with that little memorialization email saying, this is to follow up on our conversation earlier today. After that would probably become a verbal warning. And the verbal warning would be a verbal warning you give like in a Zoom call, but then you follow up with an email to say, I gave you a verbal warning. Like it would be a formal verbal warning. After that, you could say, like, I'm going to write you up, like, this is going in your employment file. And at that point, you're just building a case. So, like, hopefully, the goal would be that somewhere along that way, she would snap to and be like, I have to fulfill these hours. If she didn't, though, and you kept documenting it, then you would be in a good position to fire her. Um, Unfortunately, when it comes to an employee like that and you fire them, you can't be like, I fired, like this happened to me. It's like we let somebody go and they didn't do good work and there's just nothing you can do. Like, I can't say, like, give me my money back. I could have extended her some sort of payment for like, for leaving for a certain time. I decided not to do that because of it in light of what I found out. So like you can make certain decisions like that, but otherwise, there's like really not anything you can do within it's an employee role to like go back and penalize them. I guess unless they worked on commission, that would maybe be if you structure an employee like a commission, which I could see for some coaches that might work because if they bring in the client, then maybe they make a different payment. And then you could have something in your contract that's like you only get paid for your commission once the client like work has been performed or the money has been received and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, we have better
Would it have
processes
been
in place for
helpful?
contractors
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
And I
Now,
learned the big
yeah.
lesson of like, oh, don't let things keep going, as the business owner, like don't just try to like scoot around it. Like if you feel like the business is in jeopardy, like you need to take action on it sooner. But yeah, interesting things to learn.
And I think what a lot of business owners don't know is that you actually have what we call a fiduciary duty to do that kind of stuff. So when you start a company, it's almost like you take on a caretaker role for something and like you actually have a legal obligation to protect it. And so in that case, for example, like someone's doing something to harm your business or maybe in somebody else's case it's like someone's stealing from them or like doing bad to their clients or whatever, you actually have an obligation to do something about it. So that's if that like helps anybody to any other people pleasers out there like me and Erin who are like, well, we don't want to upset anybody, so we don't say anything. Well, it's kind of not your choice. That's like that kind of took a lot of pressure off of me. Like I remember when I had a sour situation, I just felt like a weight of responsibility towards my business. It was no longer like, oh, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. It's like this thing is bigger than me, and I owe it this obligation. And I have other people who are relying on it. Like you have other people who are relying on it. Not only your clients, but you have other contractors now who are working for you. So I think it's helpful to think about it that way too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
absolutely. Well, thank you, Erin. This has been so helpful. I'm going to share my top 3 takeaways after we go today. But will you let everybody know where to find you? And if you have like an IBS freebie or anything, any resources for them where you think we should point them, that would be really
Yeah.
helpful.
So you can find me on social media, Instagram, TikTok at erinjudge.rd. And then we do have a free like mini course for IBS. So if you're interested in that, it's linked on the social medias. Or if you go to gutavate.com/hello, that's kind of our little link tree. So you can see that free course. We also have a membership for IBS if you're looking for help and guidance. It's very easy to access and get into, but that free course is a little part of that membership just to get a taste of it.
Perfect. I'll link to everything down below. Thank you so much for doing this. I so appreciate you.
I appreciate you and thank you for having me.
I hope that episode was as helpful for you as I'm wanting it to be, because I just really wanted to. My goal with this little series that I'm going to be doing, where I bring on some guests who have gone through some different legal hiccups or have their own legal questions, is that I really want to get to the root of what you're dealing with in your business, like on the ground every day. These are the real things that are happening. So you don't have to take it from me. I know it can sometimes feel like, oh, is this stuff really going to happen to me? Like, is this stuff true? Is it really that big of a deal? I just want you to hear it from people who are actually experiencing this on the ground. So I thought that was really helpful. Okay, here are my 3 takeaways from my interview with Erin. Number 1, I think it's really hard in our businesses to balance compassion with boundaries. I thought she had a lot of good takeaways about that, but I think my takeaway here is just like that it is difficult, and I want to recognize that, and that I know you come from a good place, but I also want to normalize that you can be a nice, compassionate person while having boundaries. The second thing that I thought was most impactful about what Erin shared was that I see the power in separating yourself like from the legal side or the more like technical, like enforcing boundaries, enforcing rules, enforcing your contract side of your business so that you can stay in your zone of genius. But that so you also can continue to serve people. Like I thought something that Erin kept coming back to was that she wanted to make sure she could still serve her clients fully without being like tainted by all the stuff that might be going on in the background. So I thought that was really helpful. The third thing that I thought was great about what Erin said today was that having the right legal pieces in place is really what ended up saving her. I mean, in every single example that she shared, it was the fact that she had a contract or had the right contract or had the right language in it or had a policy already set up for it and had made things available to people. Like She had all the stuff in place and she really crossed her T's and dotted her I's and she knew what she was doing. And that's what allowed her to get paid, continue to run her business, continue to grow her business, and serve her clients at the same time. So, like I mentioned earlier, Erin is a part of the Ultimate Bundle program. If you've been checking out the Ultimate Bundle program for a while, you're going to want to keep your eyes peeled. Next Monday, October 16th through the 20th, I have a very special deal coming for you on the bundle, but it's only good for those 5 days only. If you don't know what the Ultimate Bundle is, that's my signature program that gives you over 10 DIY contract templates, all the fill in the blank contract templates, like for your website, for working with clients, selling courses, a membership program, all that kind of stuff is included. Plus, you get access to over 35 on-demand trainings from me, teaching you everything from how to legally form your business, to getting paid, to what to do if somebody doesn't pay you, to how to protect your intellectual property. That is going to be on major sale next week for 1 week only. So keep your eyes peeled for that. If you have any questions at all, of course, reach out to me. Otherwise, I hope you loved this episode and I'll see you in a few days. Thanks so much for listening to the On Your Terms podcast. Make sure to follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. You can also check out all of our podcast episodes, show notes, links, and more at samvanderwielen.com/podcast. You can learn more about legally protecting your business and take my free legal workshop, 5 Steps to Legally Protect and Grow Your Online Business at samvanderwielen.com. And to stay connected and follow along, follow me on Instagram at samvanderwielen and send me a DM to say hi. Just remember that although I am an attorney, I am not your attorney, and I am not offering you legal advice in today's episode. This episode and all of my episodes are informational and educational only. It is not a substitute for seeking out your own advice from your own lawyer. And please keep in mind that I can't offer you legal advice. I don't ever offer any legal services, but I think I offer some pretty good information.